everyone, and I hope that you're having a great day. Thank you for tuning in to Everyday Ordinary. Today, I'm going to cover the topic of how to travel alone. And this idea I am personally very intimately familiar with. But before I really go further, I want to share some concepts with you, and that is the idea that there's a lot of people who struggle with traveling alone. And there are some people out here who do not. Traveling alone, some of those struggles would be like how long it takes you to get there. 5, 6, 7, 8 hours long, or even longer than that. Then you have the idea of companion, someone to travel with to keep you company. A lot of people are very comfortable with that. And to segue off of that or into that, you also have the idea of awareness. Some people's awareness on their own isn't that high, and having that companion makes it better. So that's a struggle for some people. Then you have the sense of direction. Some people out here really have a poor sense of direction, and having that companion helps. So traveling alone, that makes it a drawback. And then you have time and so many other things. But I just want to cover a few things that I've talked to other people about that are struggles. So now I want to talk to you about two other ideas that weigh heavily into this. So I want to define, as I see it, what traveling means. So traveling means is going from one city to another, one state to another, one country to another by way of a car, train, or plane. Internationally, however it happens. Then you have traveling alone, which this whole topic is about. And traveling alone, as I see it, is in two stages. You have traveling alone, which would be me traveling to another city or state and maybe meeting someone there, whether they're traveling from another city there or they live there, and then I travel back alone. And then there's two, alone. And how I see alone is me traveling, or anyone traveling from one city or state to another city or state or country that they are not familiar with, spend a certain amount of time there, and then come back home. So that's how I want to get things started. Now I am looking forward to sharing and introducing this wonderful gentleman next to me, simply known as Joe. Joe, please tell us all a little bit about yourself.
How you guys all doing? I'm 38 years old and single, and I'm eager to start this journey to travel alone, and I have some questions for somebody that's an expert in traveling alone.
Well, wow, man, thank you. I never really looked at myself as an expert, but I appreciate that compliment, and it means a lot. So let's just dive right on into it. So have you traveled alone before?
So I've traveled alone, but not alone.
So for me, personally, I have been traveling alone for, I say, over a decade, here and there. So, but one thing I'm curious about, Joe, is at what capacity have you traveled alone?
So as you described, alone, I've gone to the airport, I've flown to a city to meet friends or family, I've driven in a car to go to a destination where it was the residence of friends or family. However, I've never traveled alone. So that's kind of where I am with my traveling. What about your capacity of traveling alone?
My capacity has almost in every aspect of it, Joe. Really, like in terms of I've traveled alone, far as driving from one state to another, flying from one state to another, and even internationally. So I've kind of tapped into all areas. And it's funny though, I have yet to drive or ride a train in the United States anywhere, but I have been on a train out the country numerous times, which is weird. So yeah. What do you think is blocking your path, or what type of struggles do you think that you are having, or that you know that you're having as regards to traveling alone?
So when I think about traveling alone, I'm fortunate that I have resources I have time, I have flexibility. But the biggest thing is I'm in my own way. My own reluctance to traveling alone and going out and taking that first step is the only thing stopping me. So the blockage is me.
Yeah, I find that to be another common struggle from talking to people. It's just, like, as you said, people just get in their own way. It's like as you get closer, you gotta get a little nervous, a little fear sets in, and then you start creating obstacles that weren't there.
So let me ask you this. Why did you decide to travel alone?
So I decided to travel alone because, just to keep it simple, I started to realize with some of the people that I was associating with, or some of my friends in the past and even in the present, they just either they didn't have the time when I had the time, they didn't have the financial support to do the type of trip. They might have had the money and the time, but maybe they had other obligations that kind of fell in the way. And because of that, I felt like it was hindering me from those experiences, and I had to try to find a way to get through that.
Okay, so as you embarked on your trip, what are some pluses and minuses traveling alone?
So some of the pluses and minuses I would say is, so we'll stay with some of the minuses by traveling alone is like, if God forbid something bad happens, you don't have that person to look out for you. Like, say if you have to get hospitalized or transported, you still have to do all of that yourself. And then something that I alluded to earlier, like sometimes you might get into one of those ruts and you're not sure what to do. That other person could potentially help you with that decision. And then you have the idea, if you're traveling out the country and you travel to a country where they predominantly speak a whole nother language, and English is not really that strong there, in those evening hours or just walking along, just having someone to talk to could be that. Now, on the flip side, some of the pros is that kind of counteracts what I just said. You don't have to worry about no one else. If you guys bumping heads, they don't want to do something, you want to do something, you can make those decisions and you can flow on. And then you can just kind of construct everything the way you want it to go without anyone interjecting and going in the opposite direction.
Okay, so you decided to take your first trip alone. How did you prepare for your first trip alone?
So this is interesting, guys. So how I prepared was, back in 2010, I've been wanting to take a transatlantic trip. I wanted to visit Europe, and my whole quest was just running into roadblocks with the people that I felt I could have a good time with one way or another. So I came across someone that I had known for quite some time, and this person happened to be living over in Ireland, Dublin, Ireland at the time. And we had conversation and we was able to work things out. So I went to visit over there and it was a wonderful time. But my whole thing was, and this is a big thing, guys, is about the mentality. My whole mental fortitude at that time was to act as if I was taking the trip alone. I flew over there by myself, but once I got with him, I was just going through things in my mind as if I could do this by myself. And because I knew I wanted to tackle it, and I didn't want that to hold me back for future concepts or ideas. So that's how I pretty much prepared for that.
Okay, so you went to Ireland to see somebody. How did you pick your first alone trip, and where was it?
Now that's a great question. So how I chose, because I'm based on comfort. So I wanted something that didn't feel that it was super far, but something that was outside the country. So I chose Puerto Rico, especially because it wasn't that far. It is US owned, and the language barrier was there, but it wasn't there at the same time. So that's what I chose, and I'm happy that I chose it just to kind of get that first edge off. And actually I did it that same year, just a couple months later.
So after your trip to Puerto Rico, what did you learn from your first trip?
Well, guys, I ain't gonna lie to you. This is what I learned. Man, I could do it. Like, I actually could do it. I went to a place where I knew no one, and I was able to go have a wonderful time. And it's so interesting, that year I happened to be staying at a hotel, and right outside on the beach, they were filming a movie at that time, and that also helped take up the time and take some of the edge off. And it was just a great experience. But the biggest thing is that I was able to do it. I was able to move around. I didn't climb into a shell. I didn't stay in my room, stay locked into the hotel. I actually ventured out. I did tours and I did other stuff.
So you just mentioned hotel, which leads me to my next question. When booking these trips, are you hotel, resort, Airbnb, rental car, rideshare program? What's your feel on that?
So for me, I typically like to go hotels because, versus Airbnb, because, when I'm at home, I'm cooking, I'm doing all that stuff myself. When I'm away traveling on a vacation, I want to be pampered. I don't want to have to make my bed up. I want to leave, come back, and the room looks like it never was touched before. So I prefer that. And also too, especially, and that's just a vacation period, but especially if it's a trip by myself, a little bit more of a security type of thing.
Makes sense.
Because you have someone up all times, and then I'm more in a touristy area. So I just a little bit more of a safety thing as well, as it relates to that. Yeah. And then as it relates to rental cars and ride shares, depending on where I'm at. So depending on where I'm at and what I want to do will determine which way I choose. Like, say for example, if I would take a trip to Orlando, I would do ride share. If my intention is to do Disney World or Universal Studios, because it has no point on getting a rental car, you're wasting money. But if I'm going somewhere else where I want to see is at a great distance, then the value is better for the rental car.
Gotcha. So you shared with us that you've gone to Puerto Rico on your first alone trip. What other cities have you visited?
So, as it relates to alone, when I travel by myself the whole time. So I've had the opportunity to visit Cabo, and that's in Mexico. And that was one of my best trips ever. And then I also had the opportunity to visit Curacao, which is an island down in the West Indies. And that was a really serene, relaxing, dope experience. And then not too long ago, I also just recently had the opportunity to visit a few parts of Spain, and that was also a very wonderful time as well.
So you just mentioned all the places that you've traveled to alone. They've all been international. Is that by design, or is that just by happenstance?
It's funny you say that. It's very interesting too. Sometimes I sit back and I think about that because I haven't taken a domestic trip alone. And I find to believe, Joe, that it's mostly because it's not that hard finding someone to travel with domestically, because it's not the same hurdles as it is internationally. And also too, it's a lot of domestic places I've already been. It's a lot of international places I haven't been, so they pique my interest more also. And it's harder to find someone to travel internationally, because it's a lot more layers to that. It's more expensive. Travel time is a lot longer. Getting a passport for those who don't have it sometimes is another obstacle, and sometimes it's procrastination too on the other person. So a lot of times I'm just ready to go ahead and do it. So I feel that a lot of that is the reason why the majority of my alone trips have been that way. So with that being said, Joe, where would be your first trip alone if you was to take one?
So, most of my traveling is based around sporting events. However, if I was to do alone, I think I'd go back to Hawaii. And the reason I'd go back to Hawaii is the mixture of things that I could do. If I want to take an excursion and go see a volcano, go into the rainforest, you can do that. If I want to go spend a day at the beach, I can do that. If you want to hang out at the hotel, I can do that. So to me, Hawaii offers, and I'm sure a whole bunch of places offer the same thing, the ability to do a bunch of different things so that this day I'm doing this day I'm doing that. So I'm not just tied in to one specific, place laying on a beach.
Hawaii is somewhere I've never been, and the pictures that they show that I've seen is amazing.
Pictures don't do it justice. When you go there, it's just unbelievable. It's hard to explain what the water looks like, what the grass looks like, what the trees look like. It's a postcard every time you look out your window.
Wow, that's exciting, man. And I've had the pleasure of talking to people who have been, and they've taken cruises that take them to the various different islands. So I hope that you decide to do that, and I hope that Joe will be willing when he comes back, whenever he decides to do it, even if it's not Hawaii, but whatever he decides to do, and share it with us, because I think that'll be a story that I would like to hear, and I think hopefully you guys might want to hear it as well.
We've talked about picking a destination, how to maneuver there, but it's coming from perspective of a man. I'm a man as well. What suggestions do you have for the women in our audience?
As it relates to the ladies, this is tough, and it's tough because I'm a guy, and it's hard to speak from that point of view. But I've had the opportunity to talk to some ladies to get some feedback that I want to offer to the ladies that are viewing this now. And some of the things that I think would be valuable is not to overpack. And I find that can be a struggle for some women out here. Not all, but for some. But overpacking, it's a lot you got to carry around. It's a lot that can be very distracting to you to take your eyes off of what's going on around you. Also, another thing is in terms of how you may choose to dress. Some of the ladies out here, they dress with garments that maybe a little challenge to move in, or maybe a little challenging to get out of easily. And shoes especially, you want to be comfortable with the shoes you wear, just in case, you don't want to be distracted. So I think those are things that are important. And one third and final thing I'm going to talk about is where you choose to sleep. I think choosing to sleep at a hotel will be a better situation by yourself versus Airbnb, because most of the Airbnbs are in residential areas, and most people in residential areas, they know who don't belong. And versus where you in a hotel, you're in a touristy area, it's a lot more police, a lot more security cameras and all that stuff to kind of make you feel a little bit more safe. So Joe, I have a question. I'm curious about, have you flown yourself internationally, and would you take an alone trip internationally or domestically? And I know you mentioned Hawaii, but technically it's a U.S. property. So it's kind of interesting because it's my senior year of college. I was fortunate enough to go play down in a football game down in Mexico. Mm-hmm. So there was 46 of us from the United States that flew down to Mexico City and then took a bus to Toluca. I knew two guys prior from playing against them, but I wouldn't say I was friends before that trip. They were just kind of, I guess, acquaintances from playing against them for 4 years. So I went to the airport, flew into Mexico City, and looked for a guy holding the sign for the players for the Aztec Bowl. Right.
And once we got there, you started seeing some guys, and all of a sudden those guys became your best friends, even though the only thing you had in common, you were playing for Team USA.
Right. That's cool.
But I think I would travel domestically, alone first, to get comfortable with it, and then internationally wouldn't be a problem once I conquer the domestic.
And that makes sense, because I believe, like what he basically suggested, there are stages to things. So I think that's a really good thing. As it relates to how somebody would start on a journey, this is what I'll suggest. I think you should start with traveling just from one city to another, maybe get a hotel, spend the night, and just see how you feel with that walk around the city. You know, maybe go from once, then after you conquer that, go to another state and try that. And even if you feel like that may be too much, start with going to the movies alone and see what that's like. You can do that. Next, you can try to go out to eat by yourself and conquer that. If you can get through those two, then you can progress to the other two, because you're going to do those other things when you go to another city or state, and then build up to like what Joe just said as it relates to traveling from another state, and then to, you know, out of the country, and then so on and so on. But I think that's a very progressive way to help build confidence, because what it is, it's about confidence in yourself that you can do it, and doing the research, learning about where you're going to go, why you want to go, what's there, because it helps you create the why you're going. It makes you more comfortable.
So those were great suggestions. Now, I'm ready to go on my first trip. What do you recommend to how I choose and prepare for my first trip?
So that's good. I think you start with is, number one is, why are you doing this? Why are you doing it? It's a loaded idea, but why, when you can answer why, it gives you purpose. And then it's also, what are some things that you like to do? And is it there? And if it's not there, find it where it's there. If you are an outdoorsy person, somewhere that's going to be outdoorsy type stuff, you might want to be there. If it's sports related stuff, you might want to have a destination trip where you're going to see a game, and that'll make you feel good, and you can adventure out and do other things while you're there. But I will focus on why you're going, why this location, and then also things that you like to do. You want to have those things that you like to do there, because it's also going to help you fill the time or fill the gaps.
I think those are all great recommendations. I can't wait to plan my first trip and then report back.
I'm looking forward to it, Joe, man. Man, I am so thankful that you were able to come and join me for this discussion. We met outside one day and we started talking about this stuff. And when he revealed that he hasn't traveled alone before, I was so surprised, because this guy here, his personality is so lively, so energizing all the time, that it really just took me out. And I was just like, man, would you be interested in doing a video? Because I think this would be something that a lot of people would enjoy. So I thank you again for coming out and joining me for this and sharing your feelings, and also me sharing my feelings about this topic. And I hope that you, the viewer, feel a little bit more comfortable, gain a greater understanding, and hopefully build some confidence in yourself if you need it to do these things. So with that being said, guys, thank you for tuning in and allowing me to share what I feel could help you get through traveling alone. Until we meet again, peace and blessings.